an emotional return to where she was captured and enslaved 3 years ago. Nadia Murad was one of the lucky ones who escaped Daesh and remembers what the terrorist group did here to our people, the Yazidis of Iraq.
I entered the school with my mother, friends, and relatives. Today, the village is surrounded by mass graves. We were trapped inside for 12 days, and no one came to our aid. We called on the United Nations, Europe, Kurdistan, and Iraq to save us, but they didn't, even though they knew 1,700 Yazidis were in danger.
Thousands of men were killed after Daesh stormed Iraq's Sinjar province in 2014. Several international groups call it genocide. 6 of her brothers were among those who were killed. One of them who survived is now fighting against Daesh in Mosul. Nadia and other Yazidi women were raped, tortured, and sold as slaves. But she escaped, taking her fight to the international stage. Now the United Nations Goodwill Ambassador is back at the Qadia refugee camp in northern Iraq, hoping to bond again with the survivors from our village. But she didn't find what she expected.
I had believed that with the liberation of Mosul, the majority of the Yazidi captives, over 3,000 women and children, would be found, because all the phone calls and all the information had indicated that that is where they were. Even my own family, my niece called us from there just 10 months ago, but now we don't know anything about her. And now all those who have been freed in Mosul, there's no more than 75 people.
Mosul is days or weeks from being taken back from Daesh. The fighting has devastated the city, but it will take Nadia and her community much longer to put the pieces back together. Rahul Radhakrishnan, TR2 World.
So that, I believe, is a sobering video about the context. And I chose that video to show you because it highlights how trafficking can be exploited by violent extremism. Right? And that, to me, is one of the first and most direct connections between the two. But in the video, Nadia also pointed out all the challenges that we face, including what the video identifies as genocide, rape, torture, which led to refugees, migration, kidnapping for slavery. Nadia also pointed out very critical aspects of the challenges for working on those issues, particularly at the nexus of VE and TIP, is the lack of data. Something that Patrick previously pointed out is that the discrepancy between 3,000 Yazidis in Mosul ending up with 70-some people found. So what do you do in those cases? How do you use the information to inform your programming if you don't know how many people are there, what the needs are? The other big challenge that was highlighted is that in conflict areas, how do you support implementing partners where their security should be a top priority? How do you get people in there to help the victims? So taking a step back, the USAID's approach to violent extremism follows the national security strategy of the administration and also the quadrennial diplomacy and development review that are published, and you can Google all that information. For us in 2011, USAID released a development response to violent extremism and insurgency. Within that document, we lay out how we see USAID's role is within the context of violent extremism, how development can help address those issues. And in the document, we highlight the needed emphasis on research. Research and analysis of the situation, of the context, of the needs, and more importantly, the most effective intervention at helping the victims and addressing violent extremism. Within the document, we lay out key factors in two parts. The first one is the push factor through which violent extremism actors can get traction for their message. Things such as gross violation of human rights, things such as weak or ungoverned territories, and also the lack of access to services or marginalizations in terms of economics or social or political access. And also corruption and impunity when people don't feel like they have a feasible venue of addressing their grievances. And on the other hand, we also look at pull factors, which helps explain the attraction and how violent extremists can attract recruits. And for that, the research is mixed, and many different theories are proposed, including boredom, the interest in participating in something that's bigger than themselves, the fight for more social and economic equality, and maybe also a sense of belonging, brotherhood, and all of that. Depending on the research that you see, different groups are vulnerable to different kinds of messaging by violent extremists. And in the policy, we highlight engagement criteria on how USA can best decide on where to engage and how to engage. Also principles for analysis, planning, and designing of our programming, and principles for operational management and responsiveness. And that's a pretty extensive outline of our work, which you can search for on the internet. Within my talk, I want to share two specific examples on how we see we can help address some of the drivers of violent extremism. One is the Dignity and Rights Program implemented in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, where we hope to target migrant workers from those countries into Russia who have been blacklisted for one reason or another and cannot go back to Russia to pursue their livelihood, and thus are at a loss for access to economic means and empowerment. And the interventions are separated, that in Kyrgyzstan, it is more of a government services, supporting government services in terms of counseling, training for those community. In Tajikistan, it's more done by NGOs who support small grants, business skills training, livelihood support. And following our evaluations of the program, we saw that both sides have their own impact in promoting a sense of community and empowerment. So for the Kyrgyzstan example, we saw a 40% increase in our participants that they felt like they're more of a part of the community, part of the country, in the nation. In Tajikistan, where a third of the people found more business empowerment, and they feel empowered to support their family and their community. One participant specifically said that, with the small loans and the business training, he has been able to establish a small business, which enabled him to now buy a TV so that his family can enjoy programming on TV. So that's one way that we see how development programs can promote a sense of community and belonging within marginalized communities. Another example that we take is from a social cohesion and reconciliation angle. The example I will give is from Sri Lanka, where after their 25 years of conflict between the Sinhalese and the Tamil, the government recently democratically elected a new government in 2015, And building on that movement toward democracy, USAID are providing many different programs to promote democracy and citizen engagement to the country. One program supports the strengthening democratic governance and accountability, where we improve transparency of the government and accountability by providing strategic planning and communication, participation in the open government partnership, and parliamentary outreach to their constituents. Another approach is, for example, supporting the Election Commission's implementation of the gender quota for women to participate in governance. And I believe that through that recent local governance election, the participation of women jumped from, I think, 5% up to close to 25%. So we hope that, in empowering marginalized community to participate in politics and governance, that it will improve the communities. We also work with the media to promote more objective reporting of issues so that issues are covered objectively and do not target minority groups, do not sensationalize issues. And most importantly, we also have community-to-community assistance interventions. And some specific examples include working through NGOs to look at fishing communities where the Tamil and the Sinhalese and the Muslims have lived in harmony for a long period of time through the conflict. So we want to look at how the structure, the community structure, is set up within those communities that allow them to resist the rhetorics. And also there are jewelry making communities where the different ethnic groups contribute to the supply chain along the way, so that they have to rely on each other to produce and have a collective livelihood. There are also other interventions that's more creative, including using the arts and sports and theaters to promote conversation around sensitive issues such as inter-ethnic conflict, around GBV, and we hope that those are means to promote a more resilient community. But the challenge here, just as we covered in the previous discussion, is a lack of knowledge, a lack of research on the best practices. What's most effective, why are they most effective, and what kind of indicators can we use to determine that a community is peaceful or not? And how do we build an early warning system so that if things starts going wrong, that we would know early enough to prevent it rather than react to incidences of violence and extremism.
Thank you. Thank you, Bea. I appreciate very much your development approach to countering violent extremism, and not just taking a sort of deterrent approach, a security approach, but looking at issues like social cohesion, how to build community participation and engagement. I think that's an approach that's perhaps more sustainable in the long term. I think too, on your challenges, the issue around lack of knowledge, it makes me also think of the first session around trafficking and the fear and the sort of stigma attached to both trafficking and violent extremism. How do you build trust? I think that's also a theme perhaps across these two areas. How do you build trust of those who are most effective so that they can come forward and share their knowledge, and also they can come forward and get assistance?